Well, today on the Godcast, I am really, really chuffed to say that we've got Kellie Maloney, who is extremely well known as a person who transitioned from a man to a woman and who has made her fame and fortune as a boxing promoter, looking after many boxers, but of course, most notably, the heavyweight champ, Lennox Lewis. Kellie, hi.
Hi.
You are in sunny Portugal.
I am, yes. I moved to. I've always had a house in Portugal for about the last 21 years. It was one of the trappings that and successes of the Lennox Lewis story that I sort of had, and it was always my place to escape. And you know, when my story broke about my transition, I came to Portugal and spent quite a lot of time here. And I realised I was happier here than anywhere else, so I decided to move here.
All right. Is it mainly Brits that your neighbours, or is it Portuguese? What's the?
No, I live in a little Portuguese village, actually, a little farming village. People have this concept of the Algarve being just Vila Moura, Albufeira, and Quinta and Valdelloba, and a couple of others like Covera that way. But Portugal is it's a beautiful country, and the Algarve has got beautiful countryside. I live in a little country village not far from Tavira. There's a few expats here, but it's mainly a Portuguese farming community.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Sounds very nice. Kellie, I've been when you kindly agreed to do this interview, I've been watching, and I've always liked boxing, but I've been just watching a few interviews with yourself, and in your stories, there's some wonderful, interesting stories. But what I don't know much about you, Kellie, is what life growing up as a kid. Were you typical kind of Millwall boy, or what was?
No, I was born to an Irish working class Roman Catholic family. I was an altar boy. I went away to be a missionary priest at the age of 13. Because I went to a Roman Catholic school, and being the oldest boy in an Irish family, they like to sort of gear you to the priesthood, and if you're a daughter, they gear you to the. I would have been a nun if I was born a female, wouldn't I? It'd have been terrible.
Kellie,
I went away to.
That is amazing that you say that you were being pushed to the priesthood. I never knew that. So was church a spiritual experience, or was it something that you just kind of suffered?
No, I was very much. I liked going to church. At the age of I think 11, I went to Lourdes in France with a pilgrimage with all the sick people of my church. I went as one of the altar boys. And I was a member of like the church football team, the church youth club. No, my life was quite centered around the church. My mother and father were run a social club, were the stewards for the church's social club in Peckham.
Right.
So no, I wasn't. My parents obviously took us to church, but as we grew up, they gave us the freedom to go to church or not go to church. It wasn't, but there wasn't. If we didn't go, they wasn't very happy, if I'm honest. And then, I'd done the same with all my children are christened, but I let them make their choice. Up to about 10 or 11, I took them to church. And then about 11 or 12, it would have been secondary school. Then I let them make their own decision. And, all my girls just stopped going to church.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I do go to church sometimes. I've been to an Anglican church here in Portugal with my friends. I don't find a lot of difference between the Anglican service and the Catholic service, to be honest.
Well, I'm Church of England, but I'm quite high, so we're quite Catholic in our kind of traditions. But so your faith sounds like it's still very much with you, then, Kellie.
Well, I believe I'm a bit like Doubting Thomas, the one that wanted to put his fingers into the hole.
A picture on the wall.
Have you got? Oh, that's interesting. A lot of people don't know when I talk about it. They go, "Who?" And I sort of, he's one of the apostles. I said, and he never believed God had risen from the dead unless he could put his fingers in the hole of the. I said, and to be honest, I'm a little bit like that. I said, I I want to believe in God, but I've not got no proof there's a God. I said, except for my upbringing, I said, and you know, without sounding rude to any religion, I find religion is a little bit a way of controlling people, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
So because we're always told God is a God-loving person, a caring person, and you know, my mother answers is great because my mother's very religious. She goes to church every day, prays for everybody. She must have a list bigger than the Pope's list of praying for people, and that's true. No, that is true. And you know, she just says God gives everyone a chance. Because I look at it this way: if there is a God, and he's this kind guy, why have we got murderers? Why have we got paedophiles? Why have we got wars? You know, why have we got Christians fighting Muslims?
Yeah.
You know, Muslims fighting Jewish people.
I think that's a standard question, isn't it? I think a lot of people want to know that, including priests and vicars. You know, if this is a loving God we're talking about, why is there suffering in the world? And I think,
and you know, so I sort of, you know, I don't go to church regular. I'll go into church every so often. I quite like going into a church when it's empty and just sitting there. And I do talk. I like looking at the statues, and I like to light a candle and pray. You know, I have certain saints that I like and I pray to. I believe that everyone has a guardian angel, and I believe my angel's been very protective of me. I also believe there could be a God because, you know, without saying, I have attempted suicide a few times. In my transitioning period, in my very down periods, yet he hasn't taken me. I was after an operation on my face in Belgium. During my transition, I was on intensive care and a life support machine for 4.5 days. And I think, do you know what? Maybe there is a God and he wants me in this world for something, for a reason, or maybe there's not a God. I honestly don't know. But my father died in 2009, and that was one of the things that helped me come out more because. But I talk to my dad at night and I go, Dad, if there is a real God and you're somewhere, you're there in heaven or you're down below with Uncle Nick throwing coal on the heaters, come back and let me know. But no one has, you know. So, and that is, I hate to say, I don't like.
Kellie, I think you just expressed what so many other people feel. They kind of want proof. They want the golden nugget that says, here I am, you know, and I think that's the mystery that we all have to wait for and look forward to.
So when people say to me, well, are you, I go, do you know what? I look at religion as an insurance policy. And they go, what do you mean? I go, well, I believe there's a God. So if there is a God, then I stand a chance of getting in. If there isn't a God, I haven't lost anything.
That's so true. It really is. Kellie, I want to just ask you this because I've recently interviewed a priest, the Church of England priest, who also transitioned, and she has got to a place where she's seems to be very comfortable with everything that's going on. And obviously, I've followed your story and I've seen the issues around mental health. I suppose I've got two questions. Is that when you were considering the transition, were you asking questions of God at that time? And how is your mental health now?
Yeah, I did ask God. I actually asked Our Lady more than God.
Yeah.
And I prayed to a couple of female saints.
Which one's Kellie? Can you remember?
Well, one was Saint Teresa, and one was obviously Saint Francis. Because I'm named after Saint Francis of Assisi, but now Saint Francis, the female one spelt with an E, who started the Poor Sisters of, Poor Sisters it was. So yeah, and you know, I prayed a hell of a lot to Our Lady. I know some religions don't believe in Our Lady, but you know, if you're being brought up in the Catholic religion, the Virgin Mary is a very important part of our religion.
So you just say the Hail Mary? Would you frequently say the Hail Mary?
Do you know what's one of the only few prayers that I still remember through? And it's quite funny that, yeah. And no, I would just ask her for protection. I would say to her, you know, Mother of God, you know, if you please help me, you know, I'm lost. I need help. Am I doing the right thing? Is this supposed to be me? You know, because I often say this. I say, God, why me? Why did you choose me to be transgender? I had a great life as Frank Maloney. So I have all these questions. You know, I've got a hell of a lot of questions for God when I finally meet him.
And how are you now, Kelly? How's your
No,
mental?
I'm very good. I'm in a very good place now. I'm very contented. As I say, I I sold my house in Portugal and bought a new house. And for the first time in my life, I've got a place that's mine, my own home. I redesigned it. There's never been none of Frank Maloney in this house. And
Right.
that's why I think this house is so important to me.
Right.
This house has purely been Kelly's house.
Yeah, that's nice. And then how old were you, Kelly, when you actually thought, you know, I'm living in the wrong body here? How old were you? Can you remember the time?
When I was 3, I knew I was different. When I was about 12, I read a story on April Ashley. You probably know about April Ashley.
I
She
don't,
was,
Kelly. I don't. Tell me.
she's from Liverpool. She was probably the first real transgender person in the UK, high profile one that we know about. And she was buried alive in the newspapers and her life was destroyed in the 60s. And when I read her story, I then could relate to how I felt growing up. And then I realized, and at that time, the word transgender wasn't, it was a sex change, which is not, you know, you can't change your sex. And the word, so I just realized that I was born in the wrong body. And I was a female in a male's body.
Yeah. And it took a long time for that to kind of evolve.
Well, it was there, but I suppressed it and I kept it really under lock and key because obviously in my upbringing in the Catholic faith, my mother and father's way of bringing me up, my brothers, and I just done what was expected of any young man. You know, I grew up in Peckham, the streets of Peckham. I went to, as you say, to Millwall. I got involved in sport because that's what our father pushed us in, encouraged us. It's wrong to say pushed us. He encouraged us to go into sport. I think he would like one of us to be a jockey or a footballer, but none of my brothers or myself, we made that far.
Did anybody ever, you know, you get some people that've got kind of sixth sense, haven't they? Did anybody ever kind of think there might be something different, or was it completely?
No, I don't think, no, because I made this point of never wanting to be different. And if anything, I overcompensated that side, and that would explain for a lot of the reasons why I was quite outspoken as Frank Maloney, the comments I made about the gay community at certain times in my life. If you check, the only people I never run down was the transgender community. I always kept very clear of that subject. But I spoke about same-sex marriages being wrong, about same-sex families being wrong, you know. And I know I was wrong about all these comments because, you know, we're all human beings. And
where did that come from, Kelly? Was it? Would you think that was some of the Roman Catholic doctrine that you'd been kind of?
No, I don't. It was anything to do with Roman Catholic. I think it was just the people I hung about with in Peckham. You know, it was they were all macho, tough guys. You know, to be honest, some of them was even into that craze of queer bashing at that time. You know, you would hear like in the cafes sitting in Peckham that some of the older guys would come and go, oh, you know, we was up so and so that night. So there was a couple of guys, you know, they use different expressions, but I won't use them now because they're not the right ones to use, you know. And we give them a clump, you know, and I used to think, oh, you know, if ever these, and I knew about myself, and I thought, what would they do to me if they ever found out? So I made a point of putting these walls all the time in front of me and blocking that, so there was no one had any indication except for myself.
Yeah. Do you know, Kelly, I don't want to patronise you, but when I looked at your story, it's so moving. You've had so much. You've had, you know, I was reading about the boxer who you found who passed away, and that must have been
Sutherland. Yeah, I mean that was.
How was that?
That was terrible. To be honest, the likes of Darren Sutherland, and then my very good friend and my colleague at work, Dean Powell, who was my matchmaker, who threw himself under the London to Brighton train, and no one knew why. And he was at the height of his career. Well, he was in the boxing career, but he was the number one person at the level he was at. And them two, and I just thought, you know what? They hid something from the world that they couldn't talk about, they couldn't speak. I could go the same way, and I nearly did. But thankfully, the love of my family and the support of my children, and maybe a bit of my religious beliefs, kept me from going that, kept pulling me back and putting me on that track till I had the courage to stop lying to myself and look in the mirror and face the real person that was looking back at him, and not the person that was living in a false world.
Yeah. Do you know what, Kellie? At the moment, my job is I'm getting a lot of bad news at the moment. People are sharing me how they're feeling, and there is no doubt whatsoever there's a bit of a mental health crisis. If it's not here now, it's around the corner.
Well, I do think with this virus, and especially with winter coming and all these new systems coming in, you're going to see the suicide rate raise, and you're going to see a lot of people suffer.
Kellie,
people are going to...
Kellie, you're a great advocate for what you are in your life and mental health. If there's somebody watching this who's like, they're on the floor at the minute, and forget transitioning and sexuality at the moment, just think purely about mental health. What would you say to somebody who's watching this now who's in that position?
I would say to them, the worst thing to do is to let yourself slip further into that dark tunnel, because once you go into that tunnel and you lose sight of the light, you don't come out of that tunnel. And the people you leave behind, they're the ones who suffer. You instantly end in your problem, but the people you leave behind will suffer. So don't try and beat this on your own. Don't try and beat this with a bottle of alcohol. It doesn't work. Don't try and beat this with pills. It doesn't work. Pick up the phone, speak to a friend, speak to a colleague, speak to a stranger. If you can't do that, pick up the phone and speak to the Samaritans, or find a group and go to that group. It's, we all need someone to talk to. We all need someone to be able to share our burden, if that's the right word. And It was only when I realized that I could turn to my family and my daughters that I was finally able to accept things and move forward.
Yeah. Thanks, Kellie, for sharing that, because I think that people are feeling like that at the minute, and there's different levels where people are. But I think if anybody,
listen, I mean, if anyone is at and they want to talk, I'm all, my Twitter page or my Instagram page, just message me, and I do a lot. I get back to a lot of people, and I have a little, not on a regular basis, because I am quite private. Much people don't believe that, but but and I do talk to them regularly. If they, I always return my messages. Maybe not straight away, but in a couple of days, I always get back to you. And I've had quite a few people that I've talked to that have either transitioned or they've been in a stage where they're going through a mental health issue, because it's one of the worst things to try and do alone. You can't do it alone. It's totally impossible to do alone. And the other thing is, don't be afraid, and this is mainly for men. Don't be too macho and too afraid to take counselling. Because you go counselling, you're not weak, you're not anything. You're a strong person if you can go and talk to a counsellor and talk about your problems. And that, and again, that I had 10 years of counselling. And I was quite surprised when I told someone, a couple of my friends that are Premiership footballers, I won't say who they was, and I told them I was having counselling, because they said, Kellie, how do you deal with all this? And I went, do you know something? We've just started, but I haven't told anyone in the team.
No.
So it's not a thing to be afraid of. It's not a thing to be ashamed of.
No.
Counsellors are there to help us.
Yeah.
Even not being patronising, even the priest or the vicar or the rabbi, you can go and talk to them.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I don't like about the Catholic religion is that priests can't get married. And I then think they can't always deal with the problems of everybody, where your religion, you can marry, so you do know what a person's going through in family crisis, and you see both sides of it, where Roman Catholic priests, you know, they can't see both sides of it because they've never had that family connection, that woman in their life, or that man or that partner in their life.
Well, maybe one day. I mean, Pope Francis is an incredible man, I think, and
well, his statement yesterday was amazing.
Absolutely wonderful, and let's just hope that people support him. Yeah, I just want to. We've been talking for almost half an hour. We only have kind of 40 minutes, Kelly, but I've not really talked about boxing, and I've always loved boxing, particularly when it was on terrestrial TV and it was free. And I grew up watching. I used to love Barry McGuigan as a boy. I used to love Alan Minter, and then moved on to Nigel Benn and Eubanks and Bruno. That is an incredibly kind of a masculine environment, and it's quite. And I have a friend who thinks that boxing is just barbaric and unnecessary.
Well, you tell your friend I have no defence for boxing because it is the most brutal sport, but it is the choice of the individual. It is a throwback to Roman gladiators. I don't care what anyone tells you. It's a theatre with blood.
Yeah. Well, that's really honest, because I thought when I asked that question, I thought, well, he might say, oh, it's good for the discipline, it's good for fitness and all that. But you've just come out and said it as it is.
Yeah, no, it is good for discipline. And, you know, it's also good for your mental health issues. You know, one of the things that kept me sane for all my journey was, and I still do it today at my young age, I still go to the gym at least 3 to 4 times a week, and I do an hour's workout. That is one of the best. To hit that punch bag, it's a great feeling when you're stressed, because you can just imagine you're hitting anyone you don't like, and you're letting your anger out and you're letting your frustration out.
Mm. Who are your greatest fighters? I guess you'd say Lennox. But...
Well, Lennox was my biggest achievement, but no, there's other fighters I worked with that I think are very important. People don't give me the credit I deserve. Everyone gives me Lennox Lewis, but I took Paul Ingalls to a world title from Scarborough, Scott Harrison to a world title from Glasgow. I made David Hayes' first world title fight for the light heavyweight. I took Rendell Munro was a great success story of mine. This was a journey fighter that came to me after being on one of my shows because I saw some potential in him. And we built him to #1 in the world in the bantamweights and took him to Tokyo to fight the #1, the best of all the bantamweight champions around at the time. If we'd have got one of the other belts, he would have been world champion. But what a story that was, the fighting bin man. And there was Julius Francis, a young black guy from Woolwich, that was at a local amateur club whose trainer I knew. And he contacted me and told me about Julius just coming out of prison. But, you know, and was never going to be a great fighter. But we took Julius. He won the Lonsdale belt outright as a heavyweight champion. And he got the ultimate fight with Mike Tyson in Manchester. And Tyson came over to the UK for his first visit.
He was a bit of a...
and I've got... and people don't realise, I don't get the credit for these fighters because they were probably not great household names, or they weren't the Nigel Benns, they wasn't the Lennox Lewises, the Prince Nazim Hamid. But, you know, to take an ordinary kid and get him all that far, even to get them to the British title, Manchester, Jamie Moore was a good story of mine, you know, that we worked with. I look at some of the fighters today and they're just getting to the world.
Do you keep in touch with these guys? Do you still keep in touch with them?
I do sometimes. I saw Rendell not long ago at a function and we chatted. We swapped phone numbers. I've still got the same phone number. Today I spoke with Spencer Oliver, who I've done a lot of work with. You know, there's a few I talk to. There's a few who I don't talk to. That's life, isn't it?
And in the boxing fraternity, how are you treated now that you're a woman? How do people...
Do you know what? I don't really know because I don't go in. There's some that I still work with because I manage a female fighter at the moment. There's some that there's some that I know have made quite derogatory remarks about me. But to me, I just put it down down to their ignorance. Names can't hurt me, so it doesn't really matter.
How was Lennox when you told him?
To be honest, I've not seen Lennox. Last time I saw Lennox was July 2013 in Liverpool. He put out a statement which was very nice and very supportive. But I have not seen him. I spoke to him since I fully transitioned. He hasn't met Kellie. I can only go by the statement that he put out that was very supportive.
Yeah. And just, I want to ask you about the Gypsy King, Tyson Fury. I think Tyson's got quite an extraordinary tale to tell, and he's become a great advocate for mental health. Two things. What do you think about him as a bloke, and what do you think him about as a boxer?
Well, you judge someone, you're a product of your environment. He's from the travelling community. I've heard his statements on gay people. I've heard his statements on transgender people. You know, I don't agree with them, but they're his views and his opinion. As a fighter, I have a lot of respect for him. You know, and I think, as you say, he's overcome a lot of problems because he's probably a guy that never had the sort of money he's got now or the fame and recognition he had. You know, he's always been big in his travelling community, but he's, shall we say, outgrown the travelling community. I mean, he'll never lose the travelling community because he's very happy in that community, and that's his community. But he's sort of now a role model to the world because he's the world heavyweight champion. And I think he's, you know, he has improved. He's a lot more sensible in what he says and how he looks at things. To be honest, I think he's a promoter's dream. I honestly do, of today's fighters, because, you know, you never know what Tyson Fury is going to turn up. And I think that's the excitement of Tyson Fury.
I'd love to interview him because I'd love to ask him those questions that you've just raised, but I don't know whether that'll ever happen. But
he's a great fighter. He is a good fighter. Somehow he works out a way to win his fights.
Yeah. Kellie, I'm almost out of time. I've enjoyed every minute of this talking to you. It's been fascinating stuff. But I asked you about mental health before, but I now want to ask you about what you would say to somebody who maybe a young guy, a teenage boy who's might be sat in his bedroom thinking, I'm gay. What do I do? I can't possibly come out. Or if there's somebody out there who is like yourself, feel like they're living in the wrong body, and there's a young woman out there who thinks she should be a man. What would you say to those people today?
Again, don't keep it bottled up. Find someone that you can talk to. Talk about it. Be honest with yourself, because unless you're honest with yourself, you can't be honest with the rest of the world. And unless you can accept yourself, no one else in the world will accept you. But you can't do this alone. Find a support group that will help you. And find someone in the gay community, in the transgender community, and don't be afraid to ask them questions. And don't, you know, and the most important thing, don't be ashamed of your sexuality or your gender, because we are all different. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. It's a dead straight road to meet our maker. There might be a few bumps on the road, but there's no U-turns or there's no roads off. You can't stop it. It's dead straight. And we all end up in that wooden box at the end. And people like yourself bless us and send us on our merry way. That is life, isn't it?
It's so true. It is so true. And Kellie, I think what you've said is, you know, we've done quite a few interviews now, and we've interviewed bishops and nuns and comedians and celebrities and boxing promoters, and it's just the rich tapestry of life, isn't it? It's just the rich tapestry.
Yeah, we're all different. You know, as I said, I used to wake up and I used to say, I used to go to bed and pray, God, please let me wake up a girl. And when I transitioned, and I was struggling to come. I used to say, God, why me? Why have you chosen me to be transgender? You know, why couldn't it be that? Why couldn't it be him next door, my neighbour, or a work colleague? Why couldn't it be Frank Warren or Eddie Hearns? But it was me.
It was you.
So,
Yeah, it was you.
so you know, we'll never know the mysteries of the world. But whoever you are, do not be ashamed of yourself. Do not put yourself into a box. You don't have to, because you're a human being.
Yeah.
And you know, it's about respect and about dignity and respect. And that's what we all look for in this world.
Yeah, so very well put, Kelly. It's so articulate. Thank you so much. And I know you're a big Millwall fan, and maybe you might get to the lofty heights of Turf Moor in the next few years. And
doing well this year. We started off well.
And if you ever
in the top 6,
have you ever been to Turf Moor, Kelly? I forgot to ask that. That's my standard question. Have you ever been to Burnley? Have you ever been to Turf Moor?
Yeah, I went there obviously when they were all in the old Division 2 or 3. You know, and I travelled the whole country with Millwall at one time. I never missed a game for about 2 or 3 years. I used to wear a white butcher's coat with all the Millwall players down it, the Millwall hat.
Yeah, great. Yeah, lovely. Kelly, it's been a real pleasure for me. It's been a privilege to be able to talk to you. Thank you for your time, and we send you our love and prayers from Burnley. And Kelly, thanks so much for your time. God bless.
Thank you. God bless. Bye.
Kelly,
will you let me know when this goes up? So